This program will be bittersweet for everyone, which is unavoidable if you really want to shift the bitterness of the tree of death to the sweetness of the tree of life. There are many reasons why so many people think ignorance is bliss and prefer ignorance, much like the movie The Matrix. You'll be shown why and much of what The Matrix really is as you proceed through this program. If you do not think you're ready, you can take the blue pill and forget about this program. Proceeding further is like taking the red pill to see just how far the rabbit hole goes. Oh yeah, we're about to get very real. A quote from George Washington, the man who refused to be king. The marvel of all history is the patience with which men and women submit to burdens unnecessarily laid upon them by their governments. And this is also including church governments. It's just how things are. Like fear, control over others is an illusion fueled by fear and abuse. Because if you observe, as soon as people think they've got some kind of power or control over others, most people start abusing the power they've been given right away. That's just been human weakness. What most people have been doing because of cycles of abuse, basically. Human history of abuse. There's a lot of reasons for this. This is true for socialism or democracy or whatever. It's sort of like dirt. Dirt is just dirt. It's what you do with it that makes it what it is. Same with money. And it's interesting that George Washington said this. This is the man who refused to be king, the first president of the United States of America. Jesus Christ said, "And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." John chapter 8, verse 32. And it's time to pull back the veil, pull it off, finally expose the marvel of all history. That's a great task. At least the foundation for you, so you have a strong foundation to build on from here. Because apparently, our world leaders have not known all the laws of the universe and have not known how to create world peace. Some of us have continued learning about it, and it's time for us all to at least finally get the basic structure set right for us. Are you with me? And all the strongest and most powerful laws are in this foundation. Benjamin Rush, who was George Washington's medical doctor, said, "Unless we put medical freedom into the Constitution, the time will come when medicine will organize an undercover dictatorship to restrict the art of healing to one class of men and deny equal privilege to others. Will be to constitute the Bastille of medical science. All such laws are un-American and despotic, and have no place in a republic. The Constitution of this republic should make special privilege for medical freedom as well as religious freedom." That was George Washington's friend, medical doctor, Benjamin Rush, also a signer to the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America. One of the signers who understood, a founding father of the country, Benjamin Rush. Now, we must understand our own world history. Unless we learn from history, history repeats itself. Some of the history is not necessarily very fun history, like the history of war. And many past presidents, along with other world leaders, have been saying, like George Washington said, "My first wish is to see this plague of mankind, war, banished from the earth." And Thomas Jefferson said, "I abhor war and view it as the greatest scourge of mankind." But they have not understood exactly how to get away from it. Our periods of peace have not really lasted very long. We've had so many wars happening, and since September 11th, 2001, it's been over 15 years, and we're still fighting. Parasitic elites are elites who live on masses of people, forgetting the true purpose of money. They've always ended up seeing people as their meat. And empowering elites, which are the minority of the elites, are actually using their wealth to bless the masses. We generally would rather help people who are actually teachable than those who are not. We like people who are actually willing to make better choices for themselves when they're presented with the options, than those who are unwilling to change. Empowering elites help people both have and see what those options are for greater change, including those who need it the most. The philosophies of true wealth and of business differ between the two groups. Just prior to my 21st birthday, I experienced a trust training program with a man who was made executive trustee of his elite family estate when he was just a child. And I'll never forget some of the things he said to our group. You might want to listen to this very closely. He said, "True wealth is never destroyed. It's merely transferred. And more wealth is transferred during war than at any other time. That's why we have them." No kidding. Really? Yes, that's why we have them. Well, what the parasitic elites call true wealth is the slave master and slave, control and greed type power tools. We're going to get a real close look at this. Philosophies of business. Well, at the Ivy League schools, at that level, they're teaching about business, that if someone steps in your way in business, you just run right over the top of them and you keep going. Business is business. It's a social disorder, again, but that's what they teach at that level. And we're exposing principles that are being broken. Laws of peace are literally being shattered right in front of us every day that we have not even been aware of. And the curtain is now being lifted up to help you see what you've never really seen or heard articulated this way. We've had an even bigger war with disease. In general and collectively, we know what's been destroying us. The Zero Disease class, as a prerequisite to this class, gives us much more insight on that. Every leader has their strengths and weaknesses. Abraham Lincoln instigated martial law in 1861. If you're charged with a crime under martial law, you are considered guilty until proven innocent. More than 13,000 civilians were arrested under martial law during the Civil War. Shortly before he was assassinated, Lincoln found, to his surprise, that he was unable to convince other government leaders who had become addicted to their newfound powers to put an end to martial law. Historians say this is a simple lesson. It's easier to put abusive restrictions in place than it is to remove them. And it was stipulated that we would remain under martial law unless we have a period of peace for at least 10 years. That's why we've not had a period of peace last even 10 years ever since then. We are still under martial law because of that. Martial law is the imposition of the highest-ranking military officer as the military governor or as the head of the government, thus removing all power from the previous executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. In the United States of America, who is the commander-in-chief of the military? The President. Abraham Lincoln initiated the Emancipation Proclamation to help free slaves, and Lincoln was assassinated in 1865. Then a portion of Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution of the United States was rewritten by the 14th Amendment in 1866. And the 14th Amendment also left a very important word out. You might think the slaves were beginning to be freed at that time. Guess what? The partial rewrite of Article 1, Section 2 left out the word free. People think Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. He did his best, but they were still passing laws to allow it long after. Well, all governmental law is written. And if it's not there, you cannot assume it. We went from whole number of free persons to whole number of persons. That just made slaves out of everybody. Under martial law, that's the kind of thing they can do. They just kind of make up their rules as they go. With our modern society governments, legislated acts of the people are always written, and many are not based on any law of nature at all. Our laws are supposed to be based on laws of nature. Those who really understand law, right? There's a staircase of laws. The Supreme Court only handles the highest law of the land, constitutional law, and that's above martial law, admiralty law, and statutory law. Higher than constitutional law is treaty law. That's how kings deal with each other. Higher than that is law of conquest, which is war. This is really important to understand because it's one of the reasons we've continued to have so many wars. Even higher than constitutional law, treaty law, and law of conquest is canon law. Do you know what that is? It's God's law. The laws of God, the laws of the universe, and laws of nature can be and are considered as all the same, meaning there are no contradictions. There are no contradictions when it comes to truth, only when combined with the philosophies of men, man's flawed perspectives. And this program will help you see all the abuse and imperfections for what they are. We've got the actual science of the laws of nature. We've got it. A lot of this actual science was buried. We've been warned about the philosophies of men from the start. Several areas of science have struggled between the scientific data and the scientific theory made by man. Mountains of actual scientific data have continued to be pushed aside when it has conflicted with the theories of men, which theories they may have wrapped around a web of emotional amoeba too painful for them to disturb. For example, a lot of the new DNA science has not mixed well with the carbon dating theory. When scientific data has not matched their philosophies, their theory, In fear, they have thrown out the actual scientific data that could otherwise prove their theory wrong. If we're to take an objective and scientific view of things, we can't be too attached to either what we were taught by the lineage we were raised in or to the latest philosophies of men. Carbon dating continues to develop a bad reputation, yet how many lineages have now changed their story to match the carbon dating theory? Why? Because of fear, they feel like it's a competition to show how old their lineage is. And who wants to go against what the rest of the world has been trained to think? Fear of becoming a pariah, which means outcast, due to the gang mentality of the science and education scholar communities. The world we live in is no different than most civilizations in history in that respect. It has the same types of Pharisees and Sadducees that existed around the time of Christ, who were so quickly offended and willing to offend. Speaking of taking and giving offense, it may not always be the case, but I can't help but to have noticed it's usually those who take offense the most that give offense the most. And remember, people tell on themselves. Most of what people say and do is a reflection of what they're feeling and thinking about themselves. Other people tell on themselves all the time, and so do we. We can start a fight by being easily offended just as easy as we can by giving offense. And it seems for too many people, it's their favorite way to argue. They just complain about everything. We need to watch ourselves. Although I do my very best to be truly inspired, I never intended to be anyone's spiritual leader. I prefer to be known as a world peace and empowerment leader. I'm content with doing what I know I can to help empower everyone on the planet as much as I can, which is ultimately about all of us sharing the leadership with peace and love. Philosophies and theories of men change over time. The actual laws of the universe are infinite and eternal. They've been the same from the beginning. Much of the basics are written in most of the biggest lineages, but some of what has been written can still be corrupted by imperfections and limitations of men, and intentionally by abusers when it comes to both translations and maintaining integrity over time. The written documents which have been passed on have been at risk of corruption by politicians. Laws of the universe can also be unwritten. It's a common mistake for any lineage to think they have the have-all, be-all of truth. The fact is, we still don't know what we don't know, so we don't know how much we still have to learn. And as soon as we get into the ego-like attitude, or we think we know it all, we stop learning. Another thing that causes wars is when a group of people think they are better than everyone else, or that they are better than anybody else. To think that they are better. Men and women have struggled to understand this from the beginning. Even Gandhi didn't understand all the laws of peace, and he's one of the greatest icons in all history as a world peace leader. Want to know a little secret, though? While he was in prison, the leader of the minority of his land was betraying him, lying, cheating, stealing, and killing the other group behind his back. And from utter fear of being such a smaller, more vulnerable group, went completely against what Gandhi wanted to see happen with his people. They even used their invalid fear as the excuse for their behavior, and Gandhi bought it. And Gandhi was raised in a household with both Muslim and Hindu teachings, which is unusual because most of the world strongly pressures people to be either one religion or another, but not to integrate them together. How can he be both Muslim and Hindu? An integrated leader. He almost killed himself several times, fasting for the miracle of freedom for his peoples. And miracles happened. In the end, when the British finally left, they gave Gandhi the keys of the kingdom right before he died. This is a great example that when our lives become out of balance, out of our control in a negative enough way, the highest form of law, canon law, initiates to balance things out for those of us who have been doing the best we can. Do you know what Gandhi did, though? He handed the keys of the kingdom to the person who had been breaking his laws of peace the most, to his next non-British biggest abuser. Why have we collectively and generally continued to enable our abusers who create war? Little commitments lead to big commitments. Because he didn't enforce his laws of peace earlier, it's like he was under a spell. And in the same way, we have all been under a spell. Little commitments lead to big commitments. Have you ever heard that? That is a law that you want to be highly aware of. Nothing turns out really big unless it starts out really small. What do you think about the alarm that goes off in your car if you don't wear your seatbelt? You know, the little bell that keeps going off in your car. Ding, 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 wear your seatbelt. Conditioning can be used to help people and also hurt people. I personally don't think anyone deserves to have to pay a big fine for not wearing a seatbelt, however ignorant it may be. I've been guilty too. I do think we can shift our paradigms and rules in a positive reward direction. Successful people have no fear of losing. They don't entertain fear. They waste no energy on it. They give no thought to losing. They only focus on winning and go out and win. This thought pattern has been well recognized, and it's time it's adopted by everyone and applied to every area of our lives. It's another law of empowerment. Did you know that education, training, and hypnosis, that they're all the same thing? You have to be careful of little things like that. I'm just saying be aware of it. Everything is hypnosis. I saw a couple of shows Marshall Silver does called The World's Greatest Hypnotist Show. And he deserves some credit for saying education, training, and hypnosis, they're all the same. And everything is hypnosis. And you can use that to empower people or disempowerment. However you use it is up to you. I recommend you do not use it for breaking the laws of peace. Do not use it to manipulate someone because all that comes from lower. Do use it for creating and enforcing your laws of peace. Do use it for empowering people because all that comes from above. Everything we do to empower someone, there are angels from above that help us empower. There are teams of light that are assigned, depending on which area, which talent, whatever we're doing to bless and align people with love and peace. And there are lower teams that help disempower people in the same way. I believe it's absolutely, inseparably connected. You can't separate any of this. It's all interconnected. Being stuck under a spell is about being too passive, being a passive person. The gold nugget from our abusers is that they'll finally teach us how to nip it in the butt right up front, how to help them pay the price of their ticket right up front. Otherwise, we teach and train them that it's okay all along, while the price of their ticket becomes higher and higher and may become too high for them to pay. Some people need to be shown where the boundaries are. While they may simply be searching for their boundaries, we may actually be creating the abuse by enabling it and by not being able or willing to show them what the boundaries are. Every effort for positive change takes positive love energy, and we may simply be too lazy to even care, let alone really love. Gandhi was a perfect forgiver. He had a lot of love, too. He loved and forgave, even his abusers, okay? We're all supposed to love and forgive our enemies. But he couldn't do it alone, and we can't either. And to establish peace, I'm telling you now, pull back the veil, it requires a special formula beyond forgiveness alone. Forgiving is a great thing, but we can't continue to reward abuse. We must teach our abusers that the price of their ticket they must pay is greater than the rewards they hope to gain through the abuse. Either way, it's called behavior modification. We will train people as an abuser or as an enlightened, integrated, and empowered being. Please understand, there are just some things we all have to pay the price for in order to establish peace. There have been cultures that have been willing to pay the price, that understood this. Abuse teaches there's nothing we can do about it, when in fact, there's everything we can do about it. And we are meant to do it all, to love and forgive our enemies and help them pay the price of their ticket, too. Sometimes it's tough love, but with love and understanding, let me show you what I'm saying. Howard Hughes, in the Aviator movie, was harassed by a senator who had been lobbying to pass laws in favor of one airline, which would give them a monopoly on international travel. The government raided Howard Hughes' businesses, confiscated all his files, and Mr. Hughes was taken into some hearings and questioned about his business practices, such as wining and dining, and otherwise bribing government officials for government contracts. And he said, "You make the laws. If you make a law against it, I'll be happy to abide by it. Everybody does it." Donald Trump, in the 2016 presidential debate, when questioned by Hillary Clinton about his several past bankruptcies and legal avoidance of taxes, he said, "You make the laws." What's interesting is, even Bill Clinton, as president on national television, encouraged everyone to do everything they can to legally avoid paying taxes, because there's a big difference between legal avoidance and tax evasion. So it's interesting that Hillary would even try to use it against Donald Trump in their debate, after all the money her and Bill have funneled into their tax shelter charity foundation, which shelters have long been known as tax avoidance tools, especially for the super wealthy. Just look at the John D. Rockefeller Foundation, set up to make him look like a humanitarian and philanthropist, but hasn't given much more than throwing us a bone when you consider the overall history, including Standard Oil Trust. And it's interesting that as an agent for the Rothschilds, who were Jewish, John D. Rockefeller being Presbyterian, and Joe Kennedy, who was Catholic, who was JFK's father, who was a United States ambassador to the United Kingdom, they came together to set up the first and Second Baptist churches in metropolitan New York, right before they set up the Fed. After the Fed was put into play, then they used the IRS as their collection agency, but they already had their loophole. And in a way, they just created yet another way of collecting taxes in the form of tithing. And they did it with one of the easiest qualifiers religion has ever thought up. Just confess that you believe and you're saved. Because the Baptist community has such a strong focus on grace, they have helped show the rest of the world the beauty of the grace of Christ's atonement to pay the price of sin. And the Baptist community has some of the greatest people out there. You can find both sides, the duality, in every lineage that has ever existed. The laws of empowerment hit every individual and organization across the board all the same, just like God is no respecter of persons. When God shows up, he catches us where we've been wrong as well as where we've been right. Every organization, every person, all the same. The more we understand the laws of empowerment, the easier it is for all of us to see through all the lies and false paths for what they are. Abuse can no longer hide behind government, not even behind a badge. Abuse can no longer hide behind the church, not even the name of Jesus Christ. It doesn't belong anywhere. And with the help of this program, abuse will be shaken out of every area of our lives much faster than what most people may think. With the two great commandments, to love God and love our neighbor, how can we really love God unless we love our neighbor? Christ did the best he could to simplify everything for people who just wanted it in simplicity, and said all the other laws hinge off of these two great commandments. And what have we done? Argued about how to love God, what the nature of God is, and we've missed the point completely. My father and I have always found a lot of support from all types of diverse churches and peoples. We've made friends everywhere, including in the Amish and Mennonite communities, who have wonderfully tight-knit cultures because we have empowered every group with so much knowledge about how God made the body. Just take a deep breath and think. Negate, neutralize, and eliminate any hate and anger from and for any and all groups and lineages, and replace it with peace, love, and joy for all. We're here to help heal, unite, and gather people together based on the true understanding of who we all are and how things really work. And from the government's perspective on charities, government has recognized the efforts of people in their communities who truly are charitable and compassionate as knowing what the needs of their communities are and as having the ability to help their communities much more than the government has ever been able to. So while too many charitable organizations and even churches are guilty of actually being parasitic in some ways, many provide vital support to the people they serve. Duality. Laws determine the behavior of people, even the wealthy. Legislated acts of men, unregulated, don't help determine behavior very well. They don't do much other than eventually train people that they are worthless, which just adds to chaos. Chaos is what you end up with when rules are neglected, or not important, or they've been buried deep in red tape, or buried by other legislated acts of men, which aren't based on any laws of nature. but created by our actual adversaries, such as the parasitic elite who can buy politicians, who in turn write their legislated acts. A quote from Mayor Amschel Rothschild: "Permit me issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws." And that's because they can be bought. Have you ever heard the term becoming a law unto yourself? It's wrong. It's a bad thing, right? That's because people who do this are justifying negative behavior. It's justifying lower choices for the dark side of intelligence and power. It's about control and greed. And we're basically disrupting other people's peace when we're justifying our behavior like that, because we're out of alignment with the laws of nature. Now, when you're in alignment with the laws of peace, you can never be a law unto yourself. Being a law unto yourself is always only if and when you're out of alignment with the laws of peace. Both laws of society and personal, when it's breaking the laws of peace of others, it's unto themselves, when it's based in lower consciousness. My father's favorite scripture to quote was the third part of Matthew chapter 25, which has 3 parts representing the kingdom of God. Verses 1 through 13 teach people the principle of preparedness with the parable of the 10 virgins. Verses 14 through 30 teach the principle of business and money with the parable of the talent. And verses 31 through 46 teach the principle of charity with the sheep and the goats. Do you notice a pattern of order? And there are many good charitable organizations, some of which really help us to love our neighbor, especially when they're the least of these. But notice the order of the 3 sections in this chapter. For how can we develop love like the Good Samaritan, help pull people off the street, shelter, feed, and clothe them, if we can't even put food on our own table or pay for the roof over our own head? Think and Grow Rich has already been done. How to Win Friends and Influence People has already been done. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, already done. The Franklin Triquation for Event Control, Productivity, and Self-Esteem has already been done, which Ayn Rand and her student Nathaniel Branden had already defined as reason, purpose, and self-esteem. So that's already been double done. Plug in cognitive dissonance, and you get what Luke Setzer calls the grand integration. Luke wrote an online article titled "The Grand Integration of Effectiveness Models." I very recently found him by doing a Google search for the keywords "the grand integration" in contemplation of a book title, because it's a term I've used within the laws of empowerment for many years, and it denotes intelligence. His article is the only thing I could find with that title. I've been teaching about the dissonance within the Why It's Possible classes in the Applied Lymphology course, which is also highly recommended as a supplement to this material. Still, I was double impressed with Luke Setzer's intellect, and he is gifted in his own way. Well, things keep getting better, and this program is very unique. It's based on my own personal life experience with the principles, from which I learned how to articulate these principles in the way I do. More secrets behind the secret. Paradigms have been reborn and redefined over and over throughout human history. And with this program, our core paradigms are more highly defined again. 20% of salesmen make 80% of the money because they've learned to embrace their pain and listen to it to find the shift to become joyful about it. In a recent conversation with my cousin Ernie, he said my father had the discipline. Everyone knew that about my father. Some people are described as having a stronger character. But what determines discipline as an element of our character, behavior, and habits? Well, that's what we're talking about here. And my father kept giving it all away, like Matthew chapter 25. He helped more people than anyone I know. For those who have known my father and I, you know how far we've gone to make it possible for everyone to access our classes. For over 40 plus years of empowerment, it's been one miracle after another. And even with this brand new program, I'm making a plea and praying for your support. With a leap of faith that as you see the value in it, please give what you can based upon your perceived value at the end of each episode to show your support and help bring it to others. Developing new systems like this takes a lot of time and energy. I have a family to support, as well as travel and other business expenses. So the more you watch and learn, the greater your perceived value will be, and more I ask you to please reciprocate. It just helps us make all our programs even better. After you learn the secrets of your problems and solutions, as your heart and mind reaches greater purity and clarity, I pray you will give all you can. Some of us call this the love offering system, which is just another way of describing reciprocation. As good as my father was at asking for donations, it wasn't enough to reach the global masses like he envisioned, but he still had a vision that his work was part of something way bigger than himself. This is what we call under-promising and over-delivering up front as well as on the back end. Under-promising and over-delivering. Well, I'm making another huge leap of faith with this program. At the end of each episode, I ask you to please reciprocate and order our other classes, which will only empower you much more.